Hi, welcome to another episode of ColdFusion. Imagine you receive a bright red envelope. The words "Everyday Birthday" are embossed in gold across the front. Inside is a single instruction: be at Lavo restaurant by nightfall. No phones, no questions. At the door, you sign an NDA, drop your phone into a locked tray, and join a convoy of minibuses headed to an undisclosed location on the Las Vegas Strip. The ride is short, but the reveal is staggering. A Ferris wheel towers under a circus-stripped canopy. Acrobats in lingerie swing overhead. Fire cannons erupt over plush white couches as Hollywood royalty drift through the crowd. Kanye West, Kim Kardashian, Paris Hilton, Bradley Cooper, Robert De Niro, even Robert Leach, the man who spent decades chronicling excess, stand awestruck. The host's name is Jho Low, a young Malaysian businessman with a baby face, a soft voice, and, somehow, billions of dollars to burn. In a roped-off corner, he toasts with Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese. Through Red Granite, a production company founded by Low's close associates, they would soon bankroll the movie, The Wolf of Wall Street, a deal that gave Scorsese and DiCaprio the kind of creative freedom that Hollywood studios rarely grant. But who is this man really? What was the true source of his staggering wealth? And how did he move so easily among Hollywood's elite and political power brokers? Authorities say that his real name is Low Tiak Jho. They allege he helped siphon more than $4.5 billion from Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund, 1MDB, the fund meant to build schools, hospitals, and infrastructure for ordinary Malaysians. Today, Jho Low is a fugitive, believed to be hiding in Shanghai and living under a false identity with a forged Australian passport. This is the story of the man who stole billions, the man who knew how to make friends and buy influence. He may have funded the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, but his life was far stranger and far more expensive than fiction.
You are watching ColdFusion TV.
Yeah, at one point, Jho Low had more spending power than just about anyone on Earth because he had liquid cash in his account that was stolen.
This fraud is unbelievable because Jho Low just stole billions of dollars almost overnight.
Investigators have called it one of the biggest corruption cases ever.
The center of one of the world's biggest cases of white-collar crime.
Billions of dollars vanished from the Malaysian state fund 1MDB, only to be spent on the political activities of a sitting prime minister and the lavish lifestyle of the scam's mysterious mastermind, a Chinese businessman called Jho Low.
He went on this kind of global spending spree.
He would go and just drop millions of dollars in nightclubs and bars.
As a lot of you in this room know, I like to plan my evenings and make sure that I always go to the best party.
Low Tiak Jho was born in 1981 on the Malaysian island of Penang into a wealthy Chinese family. His father, Larry Low, had made millions in garments and real estate. They lived well by local standards, but next to the global elite, they were small players. From a young age, Jho was fascinated by appearances. At 17, he borrowed a billionaire's yacht and a vacation home, swapping out family portraits inside with photos of his own parents. He tried to fool his friends into thinking that he owned the yacht and home. Locals thought he was a clown because of it, but for Jho, it was just a rehearsal. He had learned that perception could be more powerful than truth. At Harrow, an elite British boarding school, he surrounded himself with the sons of Gulf royals. They arrived in Rolls Royces, flew private, and carried the confidence of inherited wealth. Jho wasn't as charismatic, but he played the role of a fixer who made things happen. He even forged embassy letters in the name of princes to reserve London nightclubs, a stunt that actually worked and got him through the doors that would otherwise stay shut. By 2001, he was at the Wharton School in Philadelphia. Warren Buffett and Donald Trump also walked the same halls. Jho studied finance, but his real lessons were social. He cruised the college campus in a leased Lexus convertible, letting his classmates believe that it was his. Rumours began to spread that he was Malaysian royalty, and of course, he never denied it. He courted with the wealthiest international students, building a network of heirs and oil elites. At the same time, he hosted parties that became campus legend. For his 20th birthday, he spent $40,000 to rent out a whole nightclub. The guests were to find a bikini-clad model stretched across the bar, covered in sushi. All the while, champagne flowed endlessly. At casinos, he lost $200,000 in a single night of baccarat, without even flinching. What set Jho apart, however, was the way he staged the spectacle. He was rarely in the center. Instead, he hovered at the edges, directing the night like a performance. It was the birth of a legendary reputation, the Asian Great Gatsby, a baby-faced figure who threw lavish parties, but remained oddly in the background. But behind the champagne and smoke machines, Jho was planning something much bigger. Through his golf contacts, he met Yosef Al-Otaiba, a well-connected Emirati diplomat, and he introduced him to Khaldoon Khalifa al-Mubarak. And it was a great connection, because Khaldoon was managing Abu Dhabi's new sovereign wealth fund. He showed Jho how a sovereign wealth fund could turn oil into global influence. Today, that wealth fund is worth $302 billion and operates in 50 countries. Jho took note. Malaysia already had a cautious state fund, but nothing as ambitious as Abu Dhabi, so he saw an opening. The timing was perfect. Najib Razak, Malaysia's then Deputy Prime Minister, was on the rise. His wife, Rosmah Mansor, was infamous for her appetite for jewellery and designer bags. Najib needed money to cement his political base, and Rosmah needed cash to maintain her lifestyle. Through their film-obsessed son, Riza Aziz, Jho found his way into their inner circle. And there, he pitched them a master plan. A Malaysian sovereign wealth fund that could attract foreign investment, modernise the economy, and position Najib as a visionary leader. Out of those conversations came the Terengganu Investment Authority, soon rebranded as One Malaysia Development Berhad, or 1MDB. On paper, it was about nation building. Great. But in reality, Jho Low was writing together a machine for the largest financial heist the world had ever seen. In 2009, Jho Low made his first big move. That year, he pitched a joint venture fund with PetroSaudi International, a little-known oil company. Najib, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, announced it as proof that 1MDB was a magnet for global investment. But again, the reality was very different. PetroSaudi was struggling, but its royal connection gave it a veneer of credibility. In 2009, 1MDB, the Malaysian Sovereign Wealth Fund, wired $1 billion into the venture. Within days, $700 million of that money quietly vanished and was redirected into Gold Star Limited, a shell company secretly controlled by, you guessed it, Jho. So here's how he did it. The paperwork made Gold Star look like it was part of PetroSaudi's corporate structure, but in truth, it was nothing more than Jho's private siphon. Bankers at Deutsche Bank and Coutts London let the transfer pass. They were simply dazzled by the Saudi link and the fact that the Malaysian government was backing the deal. No need to look into it any further, I guess. With a few signatures, Jho Low had stolen $700 million. The remaining $300 million stayed in the joint venture to keep up appearances. Najib praised the deal and the press applauded. And no one outside of Jho's circle realised that 3/4 of the money had already vanished. The Petro-Saudi partnership was a proof of concept. If Jho could move hundreds of millions of dollars through a shell company with nothing but paperwork, he could do it again. Now before we continue, I want to quickly thank today's sponsor, NordVPN. I often make videos when I'm on the road, which means accessing important and oftentimes confidential information using public networks like airport Wi-Fi or even Airbnb Wi-Fi. That's where NordVPN comes in. It's a tool I genuinely use to stay safe online. With just one click, NordVPN lets you securely connect to the internet through servers in over 100 countries. This means that you can access content safely from anywhere, whether you're traveling, researching, or just trying to watch your favorite shows back home. But NordVPN is more than just a VPN now. Their Threat Protection Pro feature is like an intelligent bodyguard for your browsing. We've covered a lot of scam and fraud stories on this channel, so by now you probably know a fair bit about the bad actors. It can block trackers, phishing links, malware, and even detect fake online shops, those too good to be true deals designed to steal your information. In fact, Threat Protection Pro was independently ranked 3rd in the world for fake shop detection, beating many premium cybersecurity tools. You can even enable Dark Web Monitor, which alerts you if your personal data ever appears in a breach, all running quietly in the background, even when you're not connected to a VPN server. Right now, NordVPN is offering an exclusive ColdFusion deal. Head to nordvpn.com/ColdFusionVPN or use the code ColdFusionVPN to get a 2-year plan plus 4 extra months with a huge discount. And it comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk trying it out. That's nordvpn.com/ColdFusionVPN or code ColdFusionVPN. Thanks again to NordVPN for supporting ColdFusion. Alright, now back to the episode. After Petro-Saudi, the blueprint never changed. Aside from Gold Star Limited, Jho Low created shell companies with names like Tanor Finance and A-Bar BVI. To move that kind of money, he needed banks willing to handle it. They were the gatekeepers. Without them, the transfers couldn't cross borders or be dressed up as legitimate investments. The money moved through banks in Switzerland, Singapore, and the Cayman Islands, each time disguised as loans for Malaysia's development. And every time, like clockwork, hundreds of millions of dollars were diverted before a single road or school was built. Now, at the same time, inside the banks, a few warning lights were starting to flash. At BCI, a Swiss private bank, a compliance officer reviewed one of the burst of cash transactions and called it, quote, nebulous to say the least, end quote. At Falcon Bank in Zurich, the chief executive reviewed a set of laughably weak documents and snapped, quote, this documentation, it's a joke. But regardless, just hours later, the money was cleared. At Goldman Sachs, executives privately sensed that something was off, but they decided to look the other way. Why? Because they were getting $600 million in fees, nearly 100 times the industry norm. As the money slushed through the system, Jho turned it into a spending extravaganza. He went ballistic. In Beverly Hills, he bought a $39 million glass-walled mansion with views over Los Angeles. In New York, a $31 million penthouse. It was at the Time Warner Center, just floors below Jay-Z and Beyonce. In London, he would buy a mansion near Buckingham Palace. Where else? Now he didn't have to fake flaunting wealth. With enough fraud, he could live the lifestyle that he always wanted. But the thing is, the indulgence didn't just stop with him. Those closest to Malaysia's seat of power received the spoils. Rosmah Mansor, the Malaysian president Najib's wife, received jewelry worth tens of millions, including a $27 million pink diamond necklace. Najib himself was handed $681 million that Jho had funneled into his personal account. And get this, in text messages, this transaction was coded as 681 American pies. But the most visible spectacle came through Hollywood. With Najib's stepson, Riza Aziz, Jho founded Red Granite Pictures, which helped fund the Wolf of Wall Street movie. And it's a great movie, by the way. And with this, director Martin Scorsese enjoyed unusual freedom. He could do anything, and he even wrecked a real Lamborghini for a single scene. And the irony was striking. A film about fraud and greed, financed by one of the biggest frauds in history. Off-screen, Jho lived an even bigger spectacle. On the French Riviera, he hired Kanye West to perform on a super yacht. Meanwhile, Kate Upton arrived by helicopter. In Las Vegas, Britney Spears jumped out of a birthday cake at his circus-themed party. Miranda Kerr, then one of the most famous models, became his girlfriend. He lavished her with diamonds worth $8 million and a one-of-a-kind $1.3 million crystal piano. Imagine how many roads could be built with all of this stuff. Jamie Foxx would later describe one of Jho's stunts. A Boeing 747 flew Foxx, DiCaprio, Jonah Hill, and others to ring in the New Year's Eve twice. First in Sydney, and then flying halfway across the world for the time difference, and then doing it again on the same day in Las Vegas. Quote, "That was crazy. That was nuts," Jamie Foxx laughed, careful never to name who paid for it all. Honestly, there were a dozen more spectacles like this, each more outrageous than the last. The full list of excess could fill a book. And we should remember, it was all underwritten by cash, looted from the funds supposed to help build Malaysia's infrastructure. By 2013, it was out of control. Billions had disappeared into villas, jewelry, jewels, art, yachts, and of course, parties. On the surface, Jho was still the soft-spoken Asian Gatsby, always surrounded by models and movie stars. But below the surface, something was building. His reign of what the Department of Justice would later call, quote, the largest kleptocracy case in history, was about to unravel. By 2014, cracks were starting to show. That March, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 had just vanished with 239 people on board. As the search descended into chaos, the government of Prime Minister Najib Razak looked increasingly incompetent. And behind closed doors, that Malaysian wealth fund, the 1MDB fund which had so proudly championed, was also falling apart. At a 1MDB board meeting that March, auditors from Deloitte raised an uncomfortable issue. The fund claimed it had 2.3 billion sitting safely in, quote, investment units in the Cayman Islands. But the numbers didn't add up. Two previous auditors, Ernst & Young and KPMG, had already refused to sign off on the accounts, and for their efforts, they were quietly thrown off the case. The truth was simple. There was no real money in the Cayman Islands. It was another layer of fraud. Jho had papered over the billions that had already been siphoned out years earlier. On paper, 1MDB looked solvent, but behind the scenes, the fund was collapsing. It had nearly $10 billion in debt, but less than 20 million in actual cash. Meanwhile, the outside world was now catching on. The original fraud in 2009 that started it all was about to bite Jho in the rear. The real break came from an unlikely figure, Xavier Andre Justo, a Swiss banker and former Petro-Saudi director. When he was fired, he walked away with 200,000 internal emails and documents. These documents revealed how Petro-Saudi helped Jho siphon hundreds of millions of dollars from 1MDB. Justo leaked the documents to Claire Recastle-Brown, a journalist editor at Sarawak Report, and then later to outlets like The Guardian. For the first time, investigators had a smoking gun. But Justo paid for it. He was arrested in Thailand on blackmail charges, and he spent 18 months in a cramped cell before being pardoned. But his leak lit the fuse. The journalists at the Sarawak Report and the Wall Street Journal later joined forces to piece everything together. What they found was staggering. And it was this year, by now in 2015, that the US Department of Justice made it official, calling 1MDB, quote, the largest kleptocracy case in history.
Today's case is the largest single action ever, brought by the department's Kleptocracy Asset Recovery Initiative. 1MDB was created with the ultimate goal of improving the well-being of the Malaysian people. But unfortunately, a number of corrupt 1MDB officials treated this public trust as a personal bank account.
By then, banks in Switzerland and Singapore were under investigation. The Hollywood stars like Leonardo DiCaprio and Miranda Kerr were pressured to return the millions in gifts. In Malaysia, ordinary citizens were learning that billions of dollars meant for their country's development had gone to mansions, jewelry, and parties.
41-year-old Penang-born businessman Jho Low is probably the most wanted fugitive, not just by Malaysia, but around the world.
Prime Minister Najib clung to his defence. The $681 million in his account, he claimed, wasn't stolen, but it was a donation from the Saudi royals, and that was as support to Malaysia's ruling party. For a time, state institutions upheld the story, but it was a battle. The narrative wasn't easy to hang on to. The newspapers who were critical were silenced, opposition politicians were arrested, and investigators sidelined. By 2018, Najib was out. In a stunning election upset, voters rejected him from power after 6 decades of one-party rule. Within weeks, police raided his homes, seizing $273 million in handbags, cash, and jewelry. The hoard of goods was so big and so vast, it took 5 trucks to haul it all away. Najib was later convicted and sentenced to 12 years in prison. But what about Jho Low? Well, he was already gone. He had slipped away years earlier, moving through Hong Kong, Macau, and then eventually into mainland China.
Inspector General of Police Tan Sri Abdul Hamid Badur said the police are not giving up on the hunt for businessman fugitive Jho Low, implicated in 1MDB embezzlement and money laundering cases in Malaysia.
Today, investigators believe that he lives in Shanghai under an alias. They believe that he's being shielded by connections in Beijing and travelling on a forged Australian passport. So as it stands at the time of writing, Jho has gotten away with it. Who knows, maybe he's linked up with Dr. Ruja of OneCoin. She's one of the most wanted people in the world, and no one can find her. You can check out my video on that story if you want.
Jho Low was alleged to have played a key role in defrauding Malaysia's 1MDB sovereign wealth fund of more than $4.5 billion. But Jho Low remains a free man, so why is that the case?
So the short answer to your question is he had very, very high-level protection in China because people were getting rich. Don't forget, Jho Low still has billions of dollars from the fraud. And he's lined people's pockets. Our latest research shows that he's still very well protected there and not even really under house arrest. Seems like he's able to move around quite freely. The second point would be that there's a lot of people in Malaysia that don't really want him home facing trial. He's been indicted in Malaysia, but of course, lots and lots of people, including some people in the current government, were probably involved with him. And therefore, they don't want the dirty linen of the 1MDB scandal being aired again in Malaysia, even if Prime Minister Najib is now in jail there.
Okay, so what do we make of this wild story? Jho Low's story is one of an illusion turned into a $4.5 billion empire. From teenage tomfoolery in Penang to billion-dollar transfers through Swiss banks. He played the world's financial system like a casino and essentially robbed a nation in the process. Jho committed one of the greatest frauds in history, but he made it look easy, being out in the open, throwing parties with all those celebrities. It's pathological and morally bankrupt. But perhaps this is the most insane story of fake it till you make it in existence. So what do you guys think? Will he be eventually caught? Or will those in Beijing always protect him, making him slip through the cracks of international law like Dr. Ruja? And also, what about the banks? It's wild that they participated in this, even though they knew things weren't quite right. And the regulators, they were caught with their pants down again. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this episode. It really does mean a lot. If you did like it, there's plenty of other interesting stuff on fraud that I've done on this channel. And I just want to say, is it just me or is the dollar amounts of fraud getting absolutely insane? Like $4.5 billion and no one even bats an eyelid anymore. It's kind of crazy. Otherwise, that's about it. My name's Dagogo, and I'll catch you again soon for the next episode. Cheers guys. Have a good one.
ColdFusion. It's new thinking.